Part 1. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mishita De. Chapter 1. Listening to the principal's encouraging voice on the high platform in the distance, Gao Qiang felt a little dazed. It has been 18 years since Gao Qiang came to this world through time travel. Beginning as a baby and now facing war games. This world seems to be no different from the world Gao Qiang once had. The only difference is the war game. The war game stipulates that members of all races must join the meat grinder called the War of All Races after reaching adulthood. The winner gains everything, the loser loses everything and part of the land on which his tribe depends for survival. It is said to be a game, but in fact it is not a game. Gao Qiang's parents in this life, besides him, also gave birth to 3 brothers. Without exception, all died in the first game of adulthood. Gao Qiang smiled bitterly. This first game is the watershed for whether we can survive stably. As long as you survive in the first game, the next games will change to a mode of active choice whether to participate. In other words, as long as they survived the first game, they could no longer participate in the game and just be ordinary people. But surviving this first game is not easy. Today is the moment for Gao Qiang to come of age, and all the students who have come of age in the city are gathered here. But no matter how fancy the principal's words were on the stage, it couldn't change the fact that half of the people in the audience were as sad as Gao Qiang. At the very beginning of the war game, you can get 2 kinds of blessings, one is the Lord talent, and the other is the territory type. Among them, the territory type can only be obtained after entering the game. The Lord's talent automatically appeared in front of them a few days before reaching adulthood. At the same time, it is also reminding them that you have been marked by the war game, and no one has the possibility of escaping. Unfortunately, the powerful Lord talent is not very good. Enjoy. Introduction: you are keen on playing the flute every night and try your best to avoid most things that are difficult for you. Even the gods will sigh when they see your fighting spirit. Effect 1, the initial value of your territory's war exhaustion is 50%. When the war exhaustion reaches 100%, the territorial citizens will force you to enter a peaceful state. If you cannot enter a peaceful state, the territorial citizens will give priority to killing you. Effect 2, the subject's execution efficiency of your orders is 80%. When the execution efficiency is lower than 100%, the subjects have a chance to ignore your orders. 2 seemingly unnatural negative effects. If Gao Qiang could rate this talent, with S being the highest and C being the lowest, he would definitely give this talent a big Z. The price of 2 heaven-defying negative effects is to get 3 positive entries. If it were anyone else, they might be grinning from ear to ear. After all, most people's talent is only 1 entry. But that also depends on what kind of entry it is. After seeing the entry, Gao Qiang was completely speechless about his talent. Yaishenga, your happiness gain will be increased by 20%, and the happiness of your subjects will be increased by 10%. Birds of a feather flock together, you are more likely to attract beings who have the same odor as you. People are divided into groups. When the concept of your territory and people is consistent with yours, the combat effectiveness will be increased by 20%. What kind of incredible effect is this? Gao Qiang was even more speechless. The percentage bonus is really nice. But what is the concept of being consistent with oneself? Isn't that a hedonist or an equivalent concept? Okay, the entire territory is filled with hedonists, so what's the use of having a high combat power? Gao Qiang really doubted that when the war actually started, the people would cut off their own heads and give them to the enemy to cheer them up. However, Gao Qiang actually has some guesses as to why this talent is randomly generated. Perhaps it has something to do with his status as a time traveler. After all, in the world of Zhaoqiang, there are no war games, so he can stay up late every day, stay at home during the day, and have fun with each other. Seeing that Gao Qiang kept ignoring him, A big hand placed directly on Gao Qiang's shoulder and squeezed it hard. Hiss. Gao Qiang took a breath of air and looked at the fat man next to him. Suyukai, do you want to die? After all, Gao Qiang has lived in this world for 18 years, and he still has friends. Just like this fat man right now. Despite her round belly, she is actually not fat at all, but strong. Under that thick skin, it's all muscle. It's no problem to fight against 3 or 5 high-powered weaklings. It is precisely because of this that his talent is very interesting. General's Rich State. Effect 1, when you lead the expedition in person, your own combat effectiveness increases by 10%. Although it only has one effect, it also crushes the talents of powerful hedonists by several blocks. The 10% increase in combat power can even narrow the physical gap between humans and aliens, which is considered a good talent. Therefore, Suyukai didn't seem to be panicked at all. He even patted his belly and expressed his support to Gao Qiang. Why are you panicking? After entering the game, you can message me as soon as possible. I'll just protect you, buddy. Gao Qiang smiled and slapped Suyukai's stomach hard. As long as you don't dislike my talent. In the first game, when life and death are at stake, who among the average person is willing to bring a waste whose talent is a hedonist? Just then, the principal's speech on the stage came to an abrupt end. Not because of anything else, but because the bell of noon was slowly approaching. Gao Qiang looked at the huge clock tower in the center of the city. Sure enough, is it still impossible not to panic? When the bell of noon rang, it was the time for the war game to pull in new participants. At that time, all adult humans, no matter which plane or which planet, will be pulled into the cruel war game and become lords standing on the same starting line. Remember, human footprints are spread across many planes. Some of them use starships to cross the stars, and some use magic to fight against gods. As long as you unite under them, it is not difficult to survive the first game. After the last 2 meaningful reminders, the principal hurriedly left the square. The fear of the war game has been written on the principal's face. War games are spread across the universe, and there are also powerful human planes. Their world is not strong at all in the whole of human beings. Even if the sky falls, it is not their turn to hold it up. Before Gao Qiang could lament the principal's cowardice, the bell rang at 12 o'clock noon on time. The war game has arrived. Welcome to the war game. Today's battlefield 79,921 welcomes you. Almost in an instant, Gao Qiang entered a strange space. And under Gao Qiang's feet was 1,000 feet high. Gao Qiang was not asked whether he would participate in the game. The war game directly generated a turntable in front of Gao Qiang. Please draw your territory type. Congratulations, the territory type you drew is Fallen Empire. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the Fallen Empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 2. Fallen Empire? Looking at the territory type that was directly extracted without his consent, Gao Qiang pulled the corner of his mouth. Why does this name look so similar to his own hedonist at first glance? Fallen Empire, both contain the word fallen, which does not look like a positive characteristic. Could this be the hedonist's birds of a feather flock together entry? Sure enough, I'd better find a way to join Suyukai. Gao Qiang, who had already given up hope, casually clicked on the introduction of the Fallen Empire. The next moment, his eyes widened. What the hell is this? The entry attributes that looked like a short essay came into Gao Qiang's eyes. And those entries, Gao Qiang knew every word, but Gao Qiang did not dare to admit the effect when combined together. Fallen Empire. Introduction: this empire stood at the top long before any known country. They once had everything, they once knew everything, until they got tired of everything and became lazy and decadent. But they are powerful, they are extreme, and they despise everything. When the ants proudly raise their heads, who is ready to touch the scales of the sleeping dragon first? Effect 1, at the beginning of each game, your empire will have all the technologies that can be researched in this game. Effect 2, at the beginning of each game, you will get an ancient relic troop, and its combat power is equivalent to the top combat power of this game. Effect 3, at the beginning of each game, your territory will have a minimum history of 10,000 years. Effect 4, at the beginning of each game, you will have a map/star map containing all the terrain/cave/miracles in this game. Effect 5, at the beginning of each game, your territory cannot be born within the scope of your clan, and no one else's territory can be born around you. What is this? What on earth is this thing? Gao Qiang's mind was almost overwhelmed by the senses from hell to heaven. This is like the beginning of a game. Everyone is using a level 1 trumpet to open up new land, but Gao Qiang is the only one who is driving a max level trumpet to blast the fish pond. Born to be the strongest, there will be no one stronger than him. No. Gao Qiang slowly calmed down. According to the saying that birds of a feather flock together, how could he get such a powerful territory type with such a bad talent? Besides, the fallen empire? It can't be that simple with the word fallen. Thinking of this, Gao Qiang continued to read on. Effect 6, you can't do research, you can't change territorial policies, you can't take the initiative to start a war, you can't expand, you can't build buildings or attack units, you can't recruit soldiers. This alone poured cold water on Gao Qiang. The fallen empire, is it so degenerate? Don't want to do anything, full of the meaning of taking things as they come. It's a bit similar to the hedonist, but it's more excessive than the hedonist. The hedonist only increases the war weariness by 50% at the beginning of the war, while the fallen empire simply prohibits the war. Not only that, economic development is prohibited, and Gao Qiang is purely dependent on the legacy of his ancestors. Although it seems that it is enough to guarantee Gao Qiang's survival in this game. But it can only be said that people are not easily satisfied. Now Gao Qiang is suddenly told that he will have everything, and it is not difficult to survive. Gao Qiang also wants to try his best to live for the past 18 years. Winning the war game and plundering the land on which other races depend for survival will benefit the entire human race and even Gao Qiang himself, right? Fortunately, Effect 6 is not the end. Effect 7, when you are touched by the bottom line / on the verge of extinction, Effect 6 is invalid, and the territory type is changed to Awakened Empire, and a random bonus is obtained. Effect 8, when you declare war on the grounds of humiliation / vigilance / purification / plunder, ignore the option of prohibiting declaration of war in Effect 6. Humiliation, when someone rejects your proposal, you can launch a humiliation war, forcing the other party to apologize to you, pay compensation and accept punishment. Vigilance, when someone's technology level reaches 60% of the upper limit of this game, you can launch a vigilance war. If the war succeeds, the other party will not be able to break through the 60% research limit. Purification, when any existence threatens most of the players in this game, you can launch a purification war until the other party is destroyed. Plunder, require the other party to hand over a certain amount of resources and allow your side to plunder the other party's territory. Looking at these 4 reasons for war, Gao Qiang didn't know what to say for a while. He was too naive. Compared with the war reason of Effect 8. What is Effect 6? It's true that I don't allow war, but I can humiliate you continuously until the moment you can't help but talk back, and then start a humiliation war. Even if there is no humiliation war, everyone develops well, and when technology develops to a certain level, it will also attract the vigilance war of the fallen empire. Who wouldn't feel uncomfortable if the other party's technology was locked at 60% by force? Well, even if the other party really develops its combat power with a 60% technology blockade, it can threaten most people. This will also directly lead to the fallen empire's purification war, a war with the purpose of extermination. Of course, the most critical one is the last one, plunder war. You must give me resources. If you don't, I will go to your territory and take them myself. This is not tyranny, this is naked robbery. The effect of the entire fallen empire can be completely integrated into one sentence: I, the fallen empire, can do whatever I want. At this time, the reminder of the war game came. Before choosing the birth point, you need to name your territory. Name it? Gao Qiang thought about it and directly entered a name without hesitation. Wall of Size. Who would sigh when seeing this territory? Named. Lord Gao Qiang, territory Wall of Size, is choosing the landing location. Still not giving Gao Qiang the opportunity to choose, the war game is directly completed randomly. The timeline of this game is the Stone Age. The descending races are humans, elves, gnolls, and low-level undead. The races that lose the war will randomly assign a piece of land at the location of the participants and merge it into the territory of the winner. Gao Qiang finally understood why the principal left so anxiously. The place where the students gathered was a large open space. If the human race loses this game, the empty land will definitely be taken away. If it is taken to the elves, it is not a big deal, at most you will be a slave laborer. If it is taken to the gnolls or the undead, the principal will be eaten alive. Wish you a happy game. With a reminder from the war game, Gao Qiang suddenly felt the sense of weightlessness, and he was not prepared at all. Ah! You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 3. Suddenly, he fell from a height of 10,000 feet, but he didn't feel like he was smashed into a pulp. Gao Qiang stood steadily on the ground. You are here, what are you shouting? A puzzled voice came from the side. Gao Qiang tilted his head to look. A girl wearing clothes made of thick cardboard was staring at him with a puzzled expression. After falling from the sky, Gao Qiang fell directly into his own territory. It's just that this territory is a bit too good. According to the war game, the time of this game is the Stone Age. That is, the highest level of technology can only reach the peak of the Stone Age, and there will never be bronze or even iron. However, Gao Qiang's territory is too luxurious. The wooden sentry tower built against the mountain, on which there is a heavy crossbow made of unknown animal tendons. The simple but very heavy arrows are daunting. And the clothes worn by the initial residents. According to what Gao Qiang has learned in class over the past 18 years. In the primitive era, most people should wear grass clothes or animal skins. In the initial stage, when the territory just came, it is possible to be naked. But Gao Qiang's place is obviously not like that. Everyone's clothes are made of special paper made of wood pulp, and then the paper is glued to unknown plants to form a tough cardboard. It is not as prickly as grass clothes, and it is more comfortable than animal skins. According to the method taught in school, Gao Qiang called out his territory panel. Wall of Size. Citizens, 13,900 people. Warriors, Tyrannosaurus Knights x30, Longbowmen x500. Defense buildings, 137 crossbow watchtowers, 40 kilometers of flood control walls. Production buildings, none. Miracle buildings, ancient Stonehenge. Introduction: as early as tens of thousands of years ago, the ancestors of this territory had already stood at the top of the world. They know everything about this world and can use everything. Even the real overlord of this world bowed their heads to this group of ants. Until they were tired of everything, they created the safest shelter in the world and lived in peace in their old age. Even so, their shadows have been passed down to this day, and the wind, frost, snow, and moon of tens of thousands of years have not left any scars on their descendants. Sure enough, they are powerful. Gao Jiang secretly smacked his lips. For 18 years, the teaching of war games has been the most talked about in class. Among them, Gao Jiang has also heard about the ancient times. It is said that in the war game, the best territory developed by the human race in the ancient times was only 2,000 people. That was a high-level human who was in the interstellar era. In the ancient times, there were 2,000 times the scientific research blessing, which was barely achieved. After all, this is the most unfavorable era for humans. Humans are good at borrowing things. The lower the upper limit of scientific research, the more unfavorable it is for humans to win. Gao Jiang, whose territory had just been established, already possessed the two most terrifying and invincible arms in ancient times: knights and archers. These two arms were overwhelming in the face of any foreign race in ancient times. Roar. At this time, a roar came from a distance. Gao Jiang looked towards the place where the roar came from. In the high wall built of ancient wood, the wooden door slowly opened to both sides. A 15-meter-tall Tyrannosaurus Rex walked in from the doorframe. Some of them held ancient antelopes several times larger than Gao Jiang in their mouths. However, this powerful life form was ridden on the back by weak humans. Each Tyrannosaurus Rex carried a knight and two archers holding longbows. Well, it seems that there is meat to eat today. The sound of swallowing saliva came from Gao Jiang's ears. Gao Jiang turned his head and looked at the girl who stood beside him at the beginning. Each initial territory will designate an officer for the Lord. This should be your officer, right? Click on the other party's attribute interface casually. Shasha. Profession, Ancient Noble. Loyalty, 100. Ancient Noble. Introduction: Nobles are born to enjoy, you cannot designate them to do any production work. Hey, Lord, why are you still standing there? Seeing Gao Jiang still looking around, Shasha simply grabbed Gao Jiang's hand and ran towards the place where the Tyrannosaurus Knight left. If you don't hurry up, you will miss today's bonfire dinner. Because he didn't know the way, Gao Jiang was pulled by Shasha to a circle formed by several 100-meter-long boulders. Miracle Building, Stonehenge. Effect 1, the power of miracles covers your territory, happiness increases by 20, and cohesion is constant at 100%. Effect 2, when the stone circle that has been worshipped for generations is destroyed, your territory type will switch to the Awakened Empire, and the Dragon Awakening buff will be added. Dragon Awakening, the war weariness of this empire will never increase. Never increase? Gao Jiang's eyes lit up. Doesn't this perfectly offset his personal talent as a hedonist? Subconsciously, Gao Jiang was thinking about how to demolish this miracle building. However, after taking a glance at the Tyrannosaurus Knight in the Stonehenge, Gao Jiang quickly threw away the idea of courting death. Never mind. The mouth of the Tyrannosaurus Rex was bigger than anyone else's. Gao Jiang fully believed that if he really did that, even if he was a lord, he would probably be caught and used to fill the teeth of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Gao Jiang's thoughts were destined to be known only by himself. Because after arriving at the Stonehenge, Sasha's eyes were not on Gao Jiang at all, but were always looking into the distance. Under the Stonehenge, many people in the territory had already lit a fire on their own. The few antelopes caught by the Tyrannosaurus Rex were also being skinned and pulled out by a group of people in the territory. But more people in the territory, like Sasha, stood there and watched a few people working. Gao Jiang subconsciously opened their attribute panel. Ancient Nobles, and Ancient Nobles. That Sasha. Gao Jiang suddenly spoke. Huh? Sasha turned her head in confusion. Let me ask you something. How many ancient nobles are there in our territory? You're talking about this? Sasha tilted her head and thought about it. About 8 or 9,000. 8 or 9,000. Gao Qiang covered his face with both hands. Excluding the number of nobles and warriors, doesn't it mean that the number of people who can actually work in this territory is less than half? The territory type of the fallen empire is indeed special. What about food and grass? Gao Qiang couldn't help asking. Just like everyone else, do we still have to worry about food and grass? Food and grass. Sasha's expression became more confused. We can't even finish our food and grass. Ah. Seeing this, Sasha's confused expression became even more confused. Isn't it that a few hundred people working can feed tens of thousands of people? Why are you so surprised, Lord? Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 4. If a few hundred people plant it, is it enough to feed tens of thousands of people? Hearing Sasha's words, Gao Qiang subconsciously opened the technology interface before he had time to look at it. As expected, all technologies, including the planting industry, are fully utilized. As early as tens of thousands of years ago, they knew how to use the best breeding methods, plant at the most reasonable density, and use tools to assist. Not only were all the technologies maxed out, Gao Qiang also saw some technologies unique to the fallen empire on the technology tree. Intensive planting. Introduction. This country's planting technology has broken through the characteristics of plants. They can use the least amount of land to produce a completely incredible amount of food. Effectiveness 1, plant yield per mu is doubled. With full technology, the yield per mu can be doubled. No wonder Sasha would say that the labor of a few hundred people is enough to feed tens of thousands of people. Moreover, Gao Qiang's territory is completely different from others. According to the knowledge taught in class, when they first enter the game, most people's territories are in a state of waste and waiting for development. Among them, the ancient times were the worst. Many people might only be able to live in a simple thatched house and a few people. As for food and resources, don't even think about it. Gao Qiang is completely different. The wall of size has a history of tens of thousands of years. Even if you don't take such a long-term view, just the food reserves in recent years may not be used up by the end of the game. Oops. Sasha's voice came from Gao Qiang's ear. Lord, why are you acting weird all the time? This is the first time in my life that I heard that someone is worried about not having enough food. Promise. A glass of ice-cold watermelon juice was taken out by Sasha from nowhere and stuffed into Gao Qiang's hand. Would drinking some juice help the Lord relax? Fruit, juice. Looking at the watermelon juice in the delicate wooden cup in his hand, there is even smoothie in it. But if Gao Qiang's eyes are fine, it should be summer now, right? No, this is ancient times. Juice. Sasha got herself a drink. This time Gao Qiang saw where Sasha took out the juice. There is actually a cellar hidden under Stonehenge, and the cellar is full of ice. Save more ice in winter, so you can have ice-cold juice even in summer. Sasha took a sip of juice along with the smoothie and narrowed her eyes happily. Enjoy it? That's right. After drinking the watermelon juice, Salsa felt the sweet taste, as if she suddenly thought of something. So he looked directly at Gao Qiang. The Lord is actually worried that the plants are not tasty, right? Ah, Gao Qiang was stunned. Seeing this, Sasha felt that she had guessed it right. Well, although there are more than 200 kinds of plants planted in the territory, there are still a few missing, right? But you don't have to worry about that. Pointing to the skinned antelope in the distance, didn't I bring you to a barbecue feast? Gao Qiang continued to fall silent. In this world, most of the school curriculum is about war games. In the lectures on the ancient era, it has been mentioned more than once that the most terrifying thing in the ancient era was not monsters, but food. Because of the upper limit of technology, humans are no better than other races. If they want to eat enough in ancient times, they have to use all their strength. That's why it is said that this era is not the home of mankind. However, Gaoqiang, or rather the current group of ancient nobles, disliked the fact that the types of plants grown in the field were not rich enough and the taste was not delicious enough. Why not eat minced meat? Well, I want to stay by myself for a while. Gaoqiang smiled awkwardly at Shasha. In class, we talked about many very powerful territory types, but Fallen Empire was definitely not included among them. Because of the special territory type of Fallen Empire, the knowledge Gaoqiang has learned in the past 18 years is as if he has not learned anything at all. He learned how to identify poisonous herbs and how to manage the territory. But now standing here, Gaoqiang feels like he is the outsider. He is completely the one who is not needed. Shasha looked at Gaoqiang thoughtfully, then blinked and suddenly jumped for joy. Okay. This voice startled Gaoqiang. Then Shasha reacted quickly, blushed and coughed twice. Then, Lord, you can go for a walk, I'll call you when the barbecue is done. Seeing Shasha jumping to the side to play, Gaoqiang smiled and shook his head. I didn't expect that the atmosphere of a war game could be so relaxing. I just don't know what the situation is like with other people. But the player Wushuan General requests to add you as a friend. Gaoqiang was stunned for a moment. Did he still know such a person? However, in the war game, there is indeed a racial forum for discussion and strategic planning within the clan. Therefore, those who add their friends at the beginning must be from their own clan. Thinking of this, Gaoqiang still agreed to the friend application. Then an incoherent communication came through. I knew you wouldn't be able to get a name change card at the beginning. For it. Seeing that this was the first thing the other person said, Gaoqiang twitched the corner of his mouth. Well, he already had an idea of who it was. It must be his good brother Suyukai. Gaoqiang also knows about name change cards. Low-level rare items are actually extremely difficult to obtain. But Suyukai was able to get the name change card in less than 2 hours after the game started, which really exceeded Gaoqiang's expectations. It seems like you're doing well. Gaoqiang responded with a smile, are you proclaiming yourself an unparalleled general? What a self-proclaimed thing, what are you talking about? I am the unparalleled general under the pine trees beside the Lufeng Gorge River in the Chang'an Mountains. It's not my fault, brother, there is no enemy of me, general, under the whole pine tree. I just killed a litter of rats to establish my authority. Doesn't this give me the title of unparalleled general? Mouse. Is it a squirrel? Gaoqiang seemed to know how Suyukai's name change card came about. People have already started killing monsters. In the war game, if the Lord personally engages in a hardy battle and wins, there is a chance that items will explode. The difference may be a glass of water or a few straws. The better ones are like Suyukai, who suddenly got a name change card. I can only say that he is worthy of being a silly son of a landlord, and he is really lucky. Right. After the joke was over, Suyukai became serious. My address has been reported to you. Brother, if you can't hold on, why don't you bring your citizens to my place for shelter? As for the map, you can find it on the forum. Following Suyukai's reminder, Gaoqiang opened the forum within the human race. Sure enough, at the beginning of the arrival, many human races from higher planes had begun to unite their own forces and roughly sketched out a simple map. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 5. Thinking of this, Gaoqiang couldn't help but feel warm in his heart. Suyukai can be said to have directly exposed his territory to Gaoqiang's vision. Although the human race is a whole to the outside world, it is actually not so harmonious internally. After all, war games are not playing house. Betrayal is completely allowed in war games. Even after killing one's own lord, some unexpected benefits can be obtained. If Gao Qiang had any bad intentions, Su Yukai would have put himself in a disadvantageous position at this moment. But where am I? Gao Qiang muttered in a low voice. On this map of the human race, it is obvious that Gao Qiang is not located. This is probably related to the type of the fallen empire. The fallen empire will not be born within the sphere of influence of the race, and no one else will be born near the fallen empire. It is obviously impossible to reunite with Su Yukai. Forget it. Gao Qiang could only helplessly reject Su Yukai's proposal. Su Yukai obviously didn't expect Gao Qiang to reject it so straightforwardly. After a long pause, he gave a new response. Then you should be careful. According to my information, all lords will face natural disasters this week. Wolves are everywhere. If you can't hold on, don't force yourself, try to find other people of the same race to unite. Su Yukai regarded Gao Qiang's refusal as a man's self-esteem. But the hedonist is not a talent that can be put on the stage. Su Yukai is still a little worried that Gao Qiang will be difficult to be accepted by other human lords. After all, everyone may not even be in the same plane. Why should he take a stranger hedonist as his boss? I have to prepare too, keep in touch if there is anything. After saying that, Su Yukai hung up the communication with Gao Qiang. Thinking about it, Su Yukai looked thoughtfully at the giant rat that had died long ago at his feet. On this point, Gao Qiang really guessed wrong. The giant rat is as tall as half a person. Because it is in ancient times, even ordinary rats are not as poor as they are known. Next to the giant rats, there were several naked warriors with minor injuries. Thanks to Su Yukai who converted all the people in the territory into warriors at the beginning, and his personal talent of being rich as a general, he was able to capture these giant rats without any loss. This was a well-deserved and hardy battle. Even he had such a hard time, Gao Qiang, who was gifted as a hedonist, must have had an even harder time. After all, due to the influence of the hedonist, Gao Qiang was almost impossible to kill monsters. Thinking of this, Su Yukai hesitated for a moment. Then he was determined and reached out to one of the dead giant rats. Do you want to trade, Giant Rat Corpse X1? The war game provides a trading function for players and friends. And Su Yukai wanted to use this function to send this corpse to Gao Qiang. According to Su Yukai's rough estimate, the initial number of people in the territory was at most 3-5, and it would not be a problem to save a giant rat corpse for a week. Brother, I can only help you up to this point. Su Yukai smiled and pressed the button to initiate a transaction. Suddenly, a red light shone brightly. A dazzling exclamation mark appeared in front of Su Yukai. The current attitude of the fallen empire towards you is disdain. Disdain, a special attitude unique to the fallen empire. This territory does not care what you have done or what you are about to do. You cannot initiate a transaction with the fallen empire. Huh? Question marks popped up from Su Yukai's head. Look more closely at the object of the transaction. It is Gao Qiang, no doubt about it. Su Yukai tried to click again. Another big red exclamation mark appeared in front of Su Yukai. You cannot initiate a transaction with the fallen empire. Is this war game a bug? Su Yukai looked doubtful about his life. On the other side, Gao Qiang, who had finished the conversation with Su Yukai, also knew that the other side might not be as easy as he imagined. After all, the territory had just arrived. As a result, on the first night, a natural disaster from ancient times occurred. If it were other races, it would be easier to deal with. Gnolls are inherently ferocious and cruel, and low-level undead also have natural advantages in ancient times, and elves are the darlings of the forest. It can be said that the situation of humans is the most difficult in this era. But, natural disaster? Gao Qiang looked at the 40-kilometer-long flood control wall in the distance. Every piece of wood in this wall is made of ancient wood that is thousands of years old, and it is painted with special ancient paint to make it immortal for thousands of years. It is really hard to imagine what scale of natural disaster can break through this indestructible wall. In a blink of an eye, the sky has darkened. Shasha came to Gao-Chiang with a plate of baked potatoes. It can be seen that without the hard job of helping Gao-Chiang lead the way, Shasha is in a very good mood. Lord, the barbecue feast is about to begin. By the way, this is the snack that the chef asked me to bring to you. You haven't eaten for a day, why don't you eat something first? Sasha handed the baked potato to Gao-Chiang, but it seemed that she obviously didn't expect Gao-Chiang to really eat it. After all, the barbecue feast was about to begin. Who would want to eat this sticky baked potato if there was no barbecue? However, Gao-Chiang looked at the tray in Shasha's hand and fell into deep doubt again. This rich and fragrant taste, exquisite sauce, and a little spice as embellishment. In his 2 lives, Gao-Chiang had only seen baked potatoes of this quality in the promotion of high-end restaurants. Taking the tray, Gao-Chiang picked up the wooden fork on the plate and gently inserted a spoonful into his mouth. Delicious. The exquisite spices bring the ultimate enjoyment. Ding. You take the ancient wonder, potatoes with rosemary sauce. Your hedonist talent is satisfied. In this game, affected by your joyful mood, the combat effectiveness of all direct troops increases by 1%. Ancient wonder? Or an ancient wonder that increases the overall attributes of the troops. Although the bonus is not much, but it's just a potato. Thinking of this, Gao-Chiang ate another one. But this time the hedonist talent was not triggered again. It seems that even the food of the wonder type cannot be triggered repeatedly. However, when Gao-Chiang came to his senses, he saw Sasha's disgusted eyes. Huh! Lord, you actually ate it. After looking around and confirming that there was no one around, Sasha carefully approached Gao-Chiang. Actually, I usually feed this kind of thing to wolfhounds. Oh, so that's the case. A laughing voice came from behind Sasha, and Sasha turned her head stiffly. Cook sister, why are you here? It was a woman who was dressed similarly to Sasha, but a little taller. 9 falls. Identity, Ancient Waiter. Ancient Waiter, their mission is to serve the nobles forever, but in the upper country, even the humblest slave is better than the high and mighty king in the outside world. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 6. Aren't you worried that the Lord doesn't like simple meals, so you came here to take a look? Jologo squinted his eyes and looked at Shasha. But I seem to know some terrible secret. Sister Chef, I was wrong. Shasha lowered her head and apologized without hesitation. Wrong. Jologo smiled and covered his lips. In that case, then you can have a vegetarian feast tonight. Ah. Looking at this interesting scene, Gao-Chiang discovered a special place in the fallen empire. Here, there seems to be no such disparity in status. Warriors, nobles, and waiters are of the same class. And most importantly, I can feel the pride in their bones. But it's just as Jologo said. The evening barbecue feast was held as scheduled, and a sizzling and oily antelope leg sprinkled with seasonings was placed in front of Gao-Chiang. And poor Sasha could only gnaw the grass cake in her hand, her eyes constantly peeking at the antelope legs in front of Gao-Chiang. Eat quickly. Jologo smiled and twisted Shasha's head back. Another stack of grass cakes was placed in front of Shasha. There are many more. At this time, a big hand stretched out from the side. Jologo looked in shock. But he saw Gao-Chiang pick up a piece of grass cake, tear off a piece of barbecue from his leg, wrap them together and eat them. Then he showed an expression of enjoyment. The so-called grass cake is actually lettuce in Gao-Chiang's eyes. Dry nibbling is definitely average. But if paired with the sizzling and oily barbecue, it's definitely a must-have. As expected of the Lord, he has a lot of insights on enjoyment. Not like some people. Julugo rubbed Shasha's hair helplessly. I just know that if you eat meat, you will cry sometimes. You. Shasha looked at the grass cake in her hand and let out a dissatisfied whine. Ouch. At this moment, a strange roar reached everyone's ears. What are you yelling at? Julugo slapped Shasha hard on the head. No, it's not me. Shasha showed an innocent expression on her face. It's really not her. Gao Qiang took action to stop Julugo's movements. Because just now, he received a reminder from the war game. In the first week, natural disaster strikes, wolves are waiting for you. Although I don't know how the humans around Suyukai predicted this natural disaster. But what they predicted was indeed correct. Surrounded by wolves. Introduction, you and your subjects exude a seductive smell in the wasteland. 3 ancient giant wolves have set their sights on your piece of plump meat. Hopefully you've found a new address. After all, thatched huts are no match for them. Tip: try raising a fire. Only the unknown can make these hunters retreat temporarily. Immediately after the natural disaster struck, the number of people on the human forum dropped from 10,000 to less than 9,700. Even this number is declining rapidly. Not everyone can successfully sign up for a group to keep warm, and the threat of a pack of wolves may be higher than Gao Qiang expected. Look at the forum's slowly declining number of people. Gao Qiang's eyes looked towards the soldiers under Stonehenge. He wanted to know what choice the fallen empire would make if faced with the current situation. Could it be that he turned a blind eye? At this moment, the bonfire dinner is still going on under Stonehenge, but there are constant roars outside the city wall. Finally, a Tyrannosaurus Rex knight had veins popping out on his head. He slapped the antelope leg in his hand on the table and stood up with a dark face. You're so noisy, why don't you let people have a good meal? After a loud shout, the knight came to Stonehenge and took away the reins of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. He looked very ugly. It seemed that while he was eating, the sounds from the outside world were a naked offense to him. It wasn't until he passed by Gao Qiang that the knight forced a smile and his tone became much calmer. Lord, you eat slowly, I will give you another meal. What is he going to do? Gao Qiang asked Shasha. Shasha rolled her eyes at the soldier's back. It must have been noisy, right? It's been a long time since anyone dared to be so noisy around us. I really miss it when I say it. As she spoke, Shasha shook her head nonchalantly and secretly stuffed the grass cake into Gao Qiang's hand. It can be seen that the threats from the outside are not taken seriously by Shasha at all. I'll go out and take a look. Gao Qiang thought about it, but still couldn't sit still. As a natural disaster in the first week of the war game, it should not be too simple to think that the existence of the human lords can quickly reduce their numbers. He would not be so naive as to think that the group of wolves surrounding him were just 3 simple wolf cubs, the kind of wolf cubs he knew. Although the fallen empire starts with a group of legacy troops that are equivalent to the top combat power of this game, it can no longer recruit new warriors, and there are only a few available troops. If the war game plays tricks on him, these 3 giant wolves are also at the top level of combat power. If he loses a Tyrannosaurus Rex knight, he will suffer a big loss. Thinking of this, Gao Qiang tried hard to get up. No matter whether the giant wolf is strong or weak, it is always good to see it with your own eyes. As a result, Gao Qiang just stood up and was patted back by Julugo in an instant. Hey, my good lord, why are you joining in the fun? Julugo seemed puzzled by Gao Qiang's actions. Now is the time to enjoy. Julugo pointed to the people under the stone circle. Thousands of ancient nobles gathered around the bonfire, eating and drinking, without any tension. If you look closely at their eyes, you will find that they don't take the few wolf howls from the outside world seriously. Is it really okay? Gao Qiang was still a little worried. It's not that he didn't believe in the strength of the Tyrannosaurus rex. After all, the shock brought by the giant creature had been deeply rooted in people's hearts earlier. He didn't believe in the rules of the war game. There is no precedent for killing lords in war games. Seeing that Gao Qiang was still worried, Zhulo rubbed his chin, as if thinking about something. Suddenly his eyes lit up. Pointed to the tall flood control wall in the distance. This wall can withstand an impact force of about 3 million newtons. You can rest assured now. Ah! The seemingly irrelevant answer successfully attracted Gao Qiang's attention. 3 million newtons of impact force? If Gao Qiang remembered correctly, a car running at full speed only has an impact force of 140,000 newtons. The wall that can stand for 10,000 years is indeed something. No. Gao Qiang suddenly realized. The Newton unit of measurement is not something that can appear in ancient times, right? Is it really reasonable to pop up a physical unit thousands of years later in ancient times? Or, as long as tools after the Stone Age are not used, there is no limit to the measurement unit in war games. In this way, the fallen empire with full technology may be much more terrifying than others imagine. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 7. Don't worry, don't worry. At this time, Shasha also supported Zhulo. The wall hasn't collapsed for tens of thousands of years. According to our understanding, the guy who can make this wall collapse should not be born yet. Just when Shasha said this, outside the wall, 3-meter tall giant wolves are howling under the wall. According to their size, it seems that they can easily tear humans into pieces. If Gao Qiang saw this scene, he would probably know the reason for the rapid reduction in the forum. The territory has only been here for 1 day. These 3 giant wolves are far from being defeated by ordinary people. Even if they form a group, it is probably meaningless. After all, the more lords form a group, the more wolves they will face, and the more terrifying they will be. Perhaps this is the meaning of natural disasters. Natural disasters, as the name suggests, are disasters. The war game does not intend to let players defeat this so-called natural disaster. And the way to survive, the war game actually told everyone early. The fire, only by maintaining the fire can we avoid the attacks of these giant wolves. Unfortunately, the territory of the wall of size is too large, and it is impossible to light a bonfire everywhere. According to the rules of the game, the giant wolves should launch an attack at this moment. But the only problem facing them now is how to cross this damn wall. Awoo! A giant wolf tried to hit the wall, and even a lot of its snow-white hair fell off, but it couldn't shake the wall at all. Each log of the wall is made of ancient trees that are thousands of years old, and there is no gap between them. This is an existence that even floods can't do anything about. However, the giant wolves don't seem to be without wisdom. Seeing this, one of the giant wolves seemed to have a flash of inspiration in his eyes. Then he kept digging up the soil under the wall. A 1,000-mile embankment is destroyed by an anthole. If it breaks through from the bottom, what can this wall do even if it is strong? Awoo! With the giant wolf's call, the other 2 giant wolves also joined the ranks of digging the soil. With the combined efforts of the 3 giant wolves, a pit was quickly dug out. It worked. A trace of bloodlust flashed in the giant wolf's eyes. They seemed to have seen the time to wantonly slaughter the weak humans behind the wall after digging through the wall. Thinking of this, they couldn't help but roar loudly again. Awoo! Woo! Suddenly, one of the giant wolves that fell outside the pit changed its tone, from excitement to extreme fear. The 2 giant wolves in the cave looked at their companions in confusion. I saw a huge shadow that had completely covered the pit. The 15-meter tall Tyrannosaurus Rex lowered his head and looked coldly at the 3 giant wolves inside and outside the pit. The 3-meter tall giant wolf only reached the position of its calf. Smelling the meaty aroma emanating from the snow-white giant wolf, drool flowed from the corner of its mouth. That expression seemed to say, "So polite, you have dug a grave for yourself?" The two giant wolves in the cave have completely frozen. Because the pit was dug too deep, they could only get out of the hole if they wanted to escape. At the hole was the bloody mouth of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, waiting for the buffet to jump out of the pit. The other giant wolf outside the cave wanted to run. But due to the difference in size, even though it ran 2 steps first, it was still pulled back by the Tyrannosaurus Rex's waist. Large pools of blood fell from the mouth of the Tyrannosaurus Rex and dripped into the hole just dug by the giant wolf, causing the remaining 2 giant wolves in the cave to be scared and stiff. Congratulations, you have won the first battle in this game. Ah! Because of Shasha and Julugo's persuasion, Gao Qiang is still under the stone circle at this moment. Who would have thought that he would be notified of the victory of the first battle directly? Open the battle interface and take a look. The first thing you see is the word Great Victory. Enemy damage, Frost Giant Wolf x3. Our damage, none. Evaluation, a great victory. Reward, Wind Herb, special item. So this is a great battle? This natural disaster is a bit lame. At this moment, Gao Qiang completely forgot his previous worries. Compared with the natural disaster that ended in less than half an hour, Gao Qiang was more interested in the rewards after the battle. Speaking of which, this is the first time that Gao Qiang has gotten something by killing monsters in a war game. He wiped his greasy hands that had just grabbed the barbecue. Gao Qiang stared at the reward interface and silently said receive in his heart. The next moment, a strange herb appeared in Gao Qiang's hand. Wind Herb, special item. Effects, dispel wind, remove dampness, detoxify. It's actually a medicinal herb? Gao Qiang's eyes lit up. If there was anything most precious in ancient times, medicinal herbs would definitely be one of them. In this era, because the technology cannot be improved, the medical level cannot be developed at all. If there were no medicinal herbs, a slight scratch would probably cause the territory to lose people, which was quite scary. And medicinal herbs can be planted. If you are lucky, it is possible to multiply it several times. Thinking of this, Gao Qiang subconsciously tightened his palm a little, but ended up grabbing nothing. Hey, where is my medicine? Gao Qiang looked at his hand in confusion, only to find that the wind grass was already in Sasha's hand. When did she take it? No, Sasha took the wind grass without attracting Gao Qiang's attention at all. Even if Gao Qiang's personal attributes are very low, it's not like he can't notice it at all. Or rather, Gao Qiang suddenly thought of a possibility. Shasha, an ancient aristocrat who was completely unable to participate in labor, probably had extremely high personal attributes. On the other side, Shasha looked at the herbs in her hand thoughtfully. Then he raised his head and asked Gao Qiang, "Lord, have you visited our weed warehouse?" Weed? Gao Qiang was stunned for a moment, then subconsciously asked, "Isn't it a medicinal material? Or is it that the value of this medicinal material has not been discovered in the current territory?" Shasha scratched her head and moved closer to Julugo. "Sister Chef, I always feel that the Lord is not very smart." "Don't plot loudly," Julugo helplessly pulled Shasha's head off his shoulder. "Isn't it natural for a lord to be new to the country and not understand the situation?" With that said, Julugo stood up, first picked up some food from the side, and then made an inviting gesture to Gao Qiang. "It seems that girl Shasha has completely failed to fulfill her duty as a guide. It's better for me to lead you to visit the territory." Hearing this, Shasha smiled sheepishly. "Hey." A violent shock hit Shasha hard on the head. "You come too," Julugo said angrily, leading Gao Qiang away from the lively crowd under Stonehenge. The three of them came to a very inconspicuous warehouse nearby. There was no light near the warehouse, and the wooden warehouse also looked a bit in disrepair. There is no security at all. Therefore, the three of them were not blocked. Zhuo came to the warehouse and gave them a gentle push. With a creaking sound, the warehouse door opened. At the same time, Gao Qiang also received prompts from the war game. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shida Di. Chapter 8. Congratulations on discovering natural wonders, Prunella vulgaris, Senecio, Scrofularia. You have identified more than 10 medicinal wonders. Do you want to open the Lord Advancement Path, Sheneng? These are the so-called weeds. Gao Qiang widened his eyes. In the entire warehouse, there were piles of medicinal herbs randomly placed, without any utensils, just thrown on the ground casually. Fortunately, they were not mixed together, but a sign was hung to classify each pile of medicinal herbs. That's why Gao Qiang directly identified more than a dozen medicinal herbs after entering the warehouse. At this moment, Zhuo looked at Gao Qiang thoughtfully. At the same time, it also explained why everyone despised these herbs so much. Because the yield of these herbs is too high? The special nature of the fallen empire makes Gao Qiang's territory have all the researchable technologies at the beginning. Under the high bonus, the yield of herbs is very outrageous. The people of the Wall of Size have surprisingly good physical fitness, and they can't consume so many herbs at ordinary times. Over time, most of the herbs can only be thrown into the most inconspicuous warehouse to eat dust, quietly waiting for the arrival of rot. After listening to Zhuo's explanation, Gao Qiang scratched the back of his head. It seems that he was happy for nothing. The things that were exploded by the so-called natural disaster are not good. Gao Qiang originally thought that the words strange things were good things. By the way, Zhuo suddenly asked, Lord, have you opened the Lord's path? Gao Qiang nodded subconsciously, and then realized something and looked at Zhuo in surprise. The Lord's path has been taught in Gao Qiang's class for the past 18 years. Because the qualities of each race in each plane are different. In most cases, when a lord participates in a war game, he will only enter a game field of the same or lower level as himself. For example, Gao Qiang, according to Gao Qiang's plane level, the war games he participates in will never exceed the electrical age. But if the lord of the low-level plane wants to enter the high-level battlefield to break through the shackles of his birth plane, it is not impossible. The Lord path is something prepared for the Lord in the war game, which can upgrade his own class. Anything the Lord does in the war game may trigger a new path. Every path that advances to the extreme can send the Lord to the final battlefield. It's just that Zhuo shouldn't know this. She is just a Lord in the game, and the Lord path is something from above this game. However, Zhuo didn't realize how shocking her words were. On the contrary, Zhuo rubbed his chin at this moment, thought for a moment and then continued, let me guess, the path you triggered, Lord, should be Sheneng, right? Gao Qiang nodded, without hiding anything. Sheneng path is actually one of the most common paths for the human race. Many key points about Sheneng path were mentioned in class, and even Gao Qiang memorized the medicinal properties of herbs, which was prepared for Sheneng path. There is no other reason, this path is the easiest to trigger. You only need to identify more than 10 different herbs to trigger the advancement of this path. There is no difference between the strong and weak paths, and the gain effect of the Sheneng path is unique. Just entering the first level of the path, you can get a very strong gain buff for all the people. The people's physique is enhanced by 10%, the poison resistance is enhanced by 10%, and there is a chance to identify poisonous food before eating. At the same time, the subsequent advancement of this path is also very simple. You only need to identify more herbs to continue to upgrade, and you can easily break through the electrical age where Gao Qiang is currently. Lord, you don't want to take this path, do you? Sasha suddenly shouted. Walking to Gao Qiang's side, Sasha patted Gao Qiang on the shoulder and made a heartbroken expression. Gao Qiang was stunned by Sasha's actions. Is this path bad? It's too mediocre. Sasha pointed to the piles of medicinal materials waiting to rot in the warehouse. Everyone will definitely take this path that you can enter just by knowing some weeds. Could it be? Lord. Are you content with mediocrity? Hiss. For some reason, Gao Qiang always felt that what Sasha said made sense. If the Sheneng path was very difficult for Gao Qiang before he entered the war game, then for Gao Qiang now, it is simply within reach. As the saying goes, the easier it is to get something, the less people cherish it. Gao Qiang suddenly felt that the Sheneng path didn't seem so good. Then what path should I choose? After rejecting the Sheneng path, Gao Qiang asked Sasha and Zhuoluo. The two seemed to know everything, and they should know which path was most suitable for Gao Qiang now. Zhuoluo opened his mouth slightly, and was about to say something when he was interrupted by Sasha. Sasha quickly stepped forward, took Mu Yu's hand, looked around like a thief, and then made a hushing gesture to Zhuoluo. Then he said mysteriously, "As our lord, you must take the path that few people take, and the entry conditions are very strict." For example, Gao Qiang showed a curious expression. Sasha opened her mouth slightly and said word by word, "Miracle. Miracle path." Since Sasha said this path is good, Gao Qiang didn't doubt it. However, Gao Qiang still had a doubt. It's okay to take this path, but what are the conditions for entering? Witness the demise of a miracle or a miracle building, Sasha said mysteriously. Because the demise of a miracle is a miracle in itself, so witnessing their demise can allow the Lord to directly enter the miracle path. Bang! A slap hit Sasha's forehead hard. Zhuoluo rubbed his fist and looked at Sasha with a fake smile. Your next sentence, is it that miracle buildings can be found in the fallen empire? Hey, hee, I guessed it. Sasha stuck out her tongue playfully, and was instantly hit by another slap from Zhuoluo. After the beating, Zhuoluo rubbed his forehead helplessly. If others know what you just said, they will definitely go crazy. Well, let me think about it. Maybe they will tie you to a cross, roast you until you are crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, and then throw you outside the wall to feed the wolves. Seeing Sasha's face turn pale, Zhuoluo's tone softened a little. Then he looked at Gao Qiang embarrassedly. If the Lord wants to take the miracle path, you can go to the Lord's Hall with me later to look at the map. Most of the miracles in this world have been recorded by us. Is there actually a Lord's Hall? Gao Qiang glanced at Sasha with his eyes slanted. Sasha never said anything about this. The moment Gao Qiang landed, she led him to the bonfire party. It seems that all she has in mind is bad ideas and eating. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Me Shida Di. Chapter 9. Boom. At this moment, a sound suddenly came from the wall, the door to the outside slowly opened, and the heavy footsteps of the Tyrannosaurus Rex also appeared near the wall. The location of the old warehouse is not far from the flood control wall, so everyone can already feel the slight tremor of the ground. As if thinking of something, Sasha suddenly dripped a few drops of saliva and made a sound of joy. Roast wolf meat. Then she looked at Gao Qiang with a pitiful expression. Otherwise, how about we go and meet up with the Night Brother first? Okay. Looking at Sasha's eyes that were almost shining, Gao Qiang was embarrassed to refuse. Anyway, the natural disasters have been resolved, and there seems to be no difficulty in the territory. It shouldn't matter if you go to the Lord's Hall earlier or later. Seeing Gao Qiang agreed, Sasha volunteered to lead the way and successfully hijacked the night halfway. At this moment, Gao Qiang also saw the other party's appearance after the battle. Because he sat high enough, there was no blood on the knight's body, and it seemed that he did not participate in the battle. The Tyrannosaurus Rex was different. There were still strands of meat and a lot of blood in its bloody mouth. The bodies of 2 giant wolves were tied to the sides of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. As for the third giant wolf mentioned in the wargame notice, it was strangely missing. Seeing Gao Qiang coming in person, the knight jumped from the Tyrannosaurus Rex and fell to the ground. Then he walked quickly to Gao Qiang with the reins. "Just tell me if you need anything. Why did you come in person, Lord? Hey, how about I cut off a leg for you and take it back first?" As he spoke, the knight took out a very sharp stone sword and gestured to one of the giant wolf's legs. At the same time, other territories outside were far less relaxed than Gao Qiang's. The night had not yet faded, and the threat of natural disasters continued. Suyukai looked solemnly at the 3 giant wolves wandering in the darkness in the distance. Because of some arrogance, he, like Gao Qiang, did not unite with other human lords. Therefore, when night falls, Suyukai will face the threat of 3 giant wolves alone in his own territory. At this moment, Suyukai's territory has no more than 10 people. That giant wolf doesn't look like a simple character. Only when 2 of Suyukai's territory stand up can they match the height of a giant wolf. The possibility of humans killing the 3-meter-tall giant wolves on the first day of the territory's arrival is very small. Fortunately, Suyukai's location is relatively wealthy, and with the reminder of human lords from other higher planes, he has made preparations in advance. At this moment, the firewood in the territory should not be a problem to burn until dawn. Compared with the human lords, the lords of other races are much better. The elves are the darlings of nature and don't bother to do anything about burning fires. But they only need to find a 1,000-year-old tree that is tall enough to ensure their own safety. Wolves, however, can't climb trees. The lower-level undead, relying on their own undead characteristics, only need to bury themselves in the soil and quietly wait for the arrival of daytime. Only a few unlucky ones who are not buried deep enough will be dug out by the giant wolf as snacks. Just when all the lords thought that tonight's night would pass like this, a reminder sound from the war game sounded. Congratulations to the human lord Gao Qiang, who is located in the territory of the Wall of Sighs and is the first to eliminate the first week of natural disasters, hereby notified. The notification sounded 3 times. Except for Gao Qiang himself, who was not notified, tens of thousands of lords in the normal game learned Gao Qiang's name. Wait, Gao Qiang. Suyukai looked at this familiar name and was suddenly stunned. Subconsciously, he wanted to send a communication to Gao Qiang. But after thinking of Gao Qiang's personal talent, Suyukai still smiled and shook his head. He must have thought too much. If it was really Gao Qiang who did it, he would eat the pine tree next to him. With the talent of a hedonist, it was difficult to develop the territory on the first day. How could he lead a few crooked people to defeat the natural disaster? It is estimated that they are just people with the same name. After all, there are so many planes with human races. Isn't it normal to have a few people with the same name? Thinking of this, Suyukai withdrew his plan to communicate and turned his attention back to the 3 giant wolves outside the fire. It is more important to pay attention to the trouble in front of him. On the other side, within the territory of the jackals, a jackal with a body as tall as 2 meters frowned and looked at the notice issued by the wargame. How is it possible? His first reaction was also disbelief. You know, his personal talent is gigantic, and he can have a body 4 times that of an ordinary jackal. Therefore, as soon as the natural disaster came, he led his people to fight with the giant wolf. The ferocity of the jackal is no less than that of the wolf. The wounds on his body are proof of the ferocity of the jackal. But only after experiencing it personally, he understood how terrifying the 3 giant wolves were. Under the leadership of this Dynamax Lord, he also brought all the warriors in the territory, but still lost miserably. Half of the warriors became food for the 3 giant wolves. Only half of the warriors followed him and fled back to the range of the fire. Therefore, He really couldn't understand how humans, the weakest race in ancient times, could solve the natural disaster on the first day. Even if the guy who solved the natural disaster was an elf, an undead, or even a Knoll Lord like him, he would not be too surprised. But this guy happened to be a human. Everyone knows that humans are weak and useless without tools. He really couldn't understand why the first person to kill the natural disaster was a human, but his eyes gradually became more sinister. "You are wrong. You shouldn't be so popular." While speaking, the Knoll Lord took out a talisman paper. This is the good stuff he got from slaughtering wild animals around him crazily during the day. Blessing Scroll, Bait. Effect: after releasing this scroll, you can choose a lord to bear the natural disaster effect that all lords of the same tribe are bearing. Note: if the lord dies, all unresolved natural disasters will return to the original path. Looking at the scroll in his hand, the Knoll Lord's sinister smile became even more intense. The chance of such a good thing popping out is extremely low, but if the base is expanded to tens of thousands of lords, there will always be a lucky person who gets this thing. And he happens to be that lucky person. But this scroll has a release restriction, and it can only be released if the other party's name and territory name are known at the same time. The later the game, the lower the possibility of release. Because once the other party uses the name change card, the release conditions of this scroll cannot be met at all. Therefore, now is the best time to release this scroll in the early stage of the wargame. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being too prominent. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 10. Do you want to release the blessed scroll, Bait? Release, the Knoll Lord said without hesitation. Unexpectedly, after confirmation, the scroll was not used immediately. A huge red exclamation mark appeared in front of the Knoll Lord. There is a chance that releasing this scroll on the current target will anger the fallen empire. Do you insist on releasing it? The fallen empire? What is that? The Knoll Lord scratched the hair on the back of his head. Like humans, Knolls also had unified training on war games before they became adults, which is something that all intelligent life forms would do. But one thing he was very sure of was that in the training he had experienced, there was absolutely no one item that paid attention to the fallen empire. Besides, the name doesn't sound strong. It's already fallen, how strong can it be? Yes. There was no need to hesitate at all. The Knoll Lord continued to insist on releasing the scroll. The big red exclamation mark in front of him paused. After 3 full seconds, the exclamation mark disappeared instantly. At the same time, a server-wide notification resounded in the ears of all lords. Knoll Lord Kyle released a strange blessing scroll, Bait, to the human Lord Gaoqiang, and hereby notified. Human Lord Gaoqiang will face all the remaining natural disasters of the human race alone for a week. Instantly, all the lords who received the information changed their faces. They were originally wondering why the Knoll Lord wanted to release a blessing to a human. As a result, when the blessing effect came out, they found out what the intention of this blessing was. He wanted the life of that lord. Now is only the first day of the natural disaster. Even if the human race had a harder time surviving in ancient times, the loss of personnel would not be too serious. If calculated in this way, facing all the natural disasters of the race alone, what a terrifying number it would be. According to the 3 giant wolves corresponding to each lord, the number of giant wolves that Gaoqiang will face next is definitely more than 25,000. For the human lords, that was a number that must die. In the territory of the elves, a lord put down his bow and arrow with an ugly face. There was only one giant wolf left under the tree that had not been killed. But now, he gave up the idea of killing the giant wolf. If Gaoqiang had not completed the first kill before him, he would probably be the one who was used by the Knolls to use the blessing scroll. Even though the elves were few in number, he had to face thousands of giant wolves at the same time. Even the ancient trees of 10,000 years could not withstand such a siege. Kyle's actions aroused the vigilance of most lords and put the Knoll lords in an unfavorable situation. No one knew whether he had a second scroll. No one liked a being who could control his own life and death, let alone a foreigner. At the same time, a few lords silently mourned for Gao Qiang in their hearts. Thanks to Gao Qiang for using his own life to test Kyle's scroll, otherwise it would be hard to say who would be unlucky. At this moment, Gao Qiang received a message from Su Yukai. General Wushuan, hey, did you hear the announcement just now? The guy with the same name as you is going to be in big trouble. Yes, very unlucky. Gao Qiang closed the chat window with Su Yukai with a strange look on his face. It seems that Su Yukai still doesn't know that the guy with the same name as him is actually himself. But he is right. I am going to be in big trouble. Gao Qiang looked at the flood control wall. At this moment, the wolf howl that had disappeared outside the wall sounded again. It was even more dense and more manic than before. Because Gao Qiang has a forum within the human race, he knows the exact number of giant wolves in the outside world. 28,500. It has exceeded the number of residents of the Wall of Size. On average, each resident has to take away 1.5 giant wolves. But this is when everyone can fight. The characteristics of the fallen empire make the territory full of too many ancient nobles, who do not produce and cannot fight. At the same time, the characteristics of the fallen empire also made Gao Qiang unable to build buildings. How should he deal with all the natural disasters of the human race that gathered together? Gao Qiang gloomily read the name in his mouth. The knowledge taught in class is only in class after all. It was the first time he entered the war game, and it was not until this moment that he deeply realized the horror of the war game. Kyle taught him a good lesson. In this game, all unknown lords are potential enemies. The strongest may also be the most unfortunate existence, because they are seen by more lords, and they may die earlier than anyone else. Suddenly, Gao Qiang's shoulder was patted. Turning his head, he met Sasha's curious big eyes. Seeing Sasha's innocent eyes, Gao Qiang was a little helpless. This time, I may have to say goodbye. With more than 500 combat-capable warriors in the territory, he could not think of any way to resist nearly 30,000 giant wolves. Seeing this, Sasha came close to Juluo and whispered, I said that the Lord's brain is a little bit not working well. How many times have I told you, don't plot loudly? Juluo pushed Sasha's head aside helplessly. Then he pulled a piece of barbecued meat that was still sizzling with oil from the food in his hand and stuffed it into Gao Qiang's mouth. And the Lord, what are you talking about? Gao Qiang, whose mouth was blocked, could only make a mumbling sound. At this time, the knight who had just walked away returned. Behind him, there were more than 20 other Tyrannosaurus Rex knights. That's right, the wolf howls outside were overwhelming, and they were not deaf, so there was no reason not to hear them. On the back of one of the Tyrannosaurus Rex sat a girl who was obviously not a warrior. Subconsciously, Gao Qiang opened the panel of the girl on the back of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Hi Yukin. Identity, Corrupted Material Officer. Corrupted Material Officer, these material officers know the most reasonable means of dispatching, and only one person can perfectly operate the material control of more than 100,000 people. But the quiet life for many years has made them accustomed to mediocre life, and their material control ability is only 1/5 of that in their heyday. Material Officer? At this time, Gao Qiang saw that she actually revealed an excited look in her eyes when she heard the wolf howls outside. Wait, what did she think of those 30,000 giant wolves outside? She didn't think that only 30 Tyrannosaurus Rex knights could deal with nearly 30,000 giant wolves from the outside world, did she? Even if 30,000 pigs were replaced, they would be stuffed to death by the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Just when Gao Qiang thought of this, Sasha had already spoken first. Sister Yu. Hearing the voice, Hayukin turned her head. After seeing the Lord Gaoqiang, she slightly restrained the smile on her face. The next moment, the girl, who looked short, jumped directly and jumped off the back of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. So the Lord is here too. Do you want to go and see the supplies that are about to be put into the warehouse?